Well, I'm joined now by a man who was voted Britain's most admired CEO for 4 years straight. The former BP boss, now a partner at Riverstone Holdings, Lord John Browne, is with us now. Lord Browne, good morning. Thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning. You've been involved in energy for really the whole of your professional life. Indeed, you grew up with energy. You're speaking today at Bloomberg's New Energy Finance Summit about leadership. It's also a subject that you talk about in your book. Do you think that there's been a lack of leadership when it comes to climate change?
I think there obviously has, because otherwise we would have got, I think, a bit further. But when I say leadership, I don't mean lack of will. I think it's lack of clarity about what it is we need to do, which is to change the energy systems of the world quite a lot over a period of time.
Now, that obviously is a huge ask, and to do it, it needs to be kind of broken down into chunks that are more acceptable to people. Possibly worryingly, it does seem that a lot of people feel less passionate about climate change than they did a few years ago. Do you think this is to do with recession and it's a temporary dip? And what needs to be done to change that?
Absolutely. I think people's preoccupation is elsewhere. It's about jobs, it's about their own personal finances, and governments looking very much at their deficits and how do they manage to keep their programs going over the next couple of years. Actually, meanwhile, however, there's a tremendous number of national policies which are still being acted upon, which are changing slowly the way in which we produce and consume energy, whether that's the US from the stimulus bill, or in Europe, which is founded on these so-called 20-20-20 targets.
Now, you talk about these changes happening slowly, and yet in your book, Beyond Business, you set out, I think, very succinctly how much oil we're going to use, how much oil we've got left, and crucially, what has to change over the next 50 years. Now, you do say that we've got time for an orderly transition, but that really means starting now. Do you think that is likely to happen?
Well, I think we are starting now. As I say, we've got lots of national policies right around the world which are changing the way energy is delivered, whether it's through wind and solar or biomass or hydro, as well as, of course, changing balance between gas and oil. The tremendous changes in the way in which gas has been both discovered and produced in America, the so-called shale gas phenomenon, is going to, I think, change the carbon content of electric power generation. It will reduce it. So we do have time, we have transition. I think this transition can take place, but we have to be determined. My concern would be that if we do nothing else other than rest on where we are today, in a couple of years' time, we'll lose quite a lot of momentum. So we need to rethink how we can change the energy mix, and actually then, when the world feels a bit better, pay a bit more for energy.
You mentioned the US shale gas revolution there. Do you think that's something that is exportable to Europe and to Asia?
Well, we don't know yet. People are certainly very excited about drilling for gas in the shales of Europe. There's a lot of activity. People have taken out a lot of permits to do that, but not much activity has taken place. I'd expect it to be reasonably successful. I think it is a very good bet to go and try and make this happen. And I think it should change the way in which gas is delivered in Europe. And that will change the power balances around, because we import, of course, a lot of gas in Europe from Russia and elsewhere.
Now, what are the most promising renewable energy sectors for you?
Well, at the moment, they are the traditional ones, which are wind. Still a lot of activity in wind, in particular offshore, where the area is not very well exploited yet. And, of course, solar, which the cost of producing electricity from solar is coming down. And there are plenty of places where the sun shines very brightly and for a very long period during the day. So that's these two areas, I think, very promising.
And what's your prognosis for marine energy, particularly here in the UK?
Well, I think that's a bit more advanced than we need to look at today. There's obviously something that can be done with barrages and various things like that around the UK. But I think the more known technology at the moment is larger scale wind turbines. And that's something where in the marine environment, I think the UK can probably take quite a lead.
Now, getting back to this idea of leadership, what incentives should governments be putting in place to try and encourage investments into the renewable energy sector?
Probably the single most important thing at the moment is to find ways of producing more finance for the sector. Finance in the form of borrowing, debt, that is, which is difficult to come by because banks have no capability of lending significant quantities. So people have been talking about in Europe, the EIB doing more activity. That's a good thing. Inventing green banks, that would be a good idea, where commercial loans could be made to developers so that more development could take place. I think that's the most important thing. The second most important thing is always to remember that incentives have to produce the right returns for business. Business is not slothful on purpose. It simply doesn't respond if the returns don't match the risk being undertaken. And in some cases, the incentives for renewable energy fall slightly short of what's needed to get activity going.
Now, in your book, you clearly say that we're still waiting for the political debate to mature. Just how far away do you think we are from a globally binding treaty on climate change?
I think we're quite a long way away. We've got to sort out, I think, domestic policies first. People have to feel comfortable in their own skin, as it were, that what they're doing, either in a bloc like the EU or in a big domestic environment like the US, that what they're doing is fully supported by their population and actually can be enacted. Business can actually do what is promised. And then I think eventually we'll begin to join the world up, whether it's through an international treaty of a conventional form or whether it's to do with having, as it were, exchange rates related to the price of carbon in different parts of the world. A more loose treaty, I think, remains to be seen.
Lord Browne.
And I think we've got to get each big place sorted out first.
Lord Browne, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning.